Okay, test on the mic. Looks like we're on here.
Check, 1, 2.
Check.
Okay, sure. Call to order the governing board of the St. Johns River Water Management District, February 9th, 2021, 10 o'clock a.m. meeting. Welcome and good morning. I'm Doug Burnett, Chair of the St. Johns River Water Management District's governing board. For those watching or live stream, please be aware there may be a slight delay. If you have any unexpected technical difficulties with your connection, today's video will also be available for replay. Fellow board members, for all items requiring a vote, we will do so by a roll call. Ask unless you're offering comments, asking questions, and voting that you please mute your phones in order to minimize noise and the electronic effect of echo. Thank you, and let's begin. So, the Pledge of Allegiance. Where is the flag? Oh, got it now. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
One personal note, if you were at our ceremony yesterday, thank you so much for attending. If you noticed during the Pledge of Allegiance, I might not have put my hand over my heart. It's the customary for military to stand at the position of attention without hand over heart. That really applies to uniform. I may have forgotten it. I just don't remember. So if it did, it was part of our particular approach to that piece of democracy there. I want to thank the city of Apopka for hosting the governing board meeting. Really classy chambers. I was told this was a former high school basketball court, hence the high ceilings. But look at what a great job that the leadership had done. Mr. Mayor, Mayor Nelson, thank you, sir, for that. I'd like to recognize our elected officials. It's important. That's the mainstream of democracy, is those that go to work for us every day. So I'll just call your name if that's okay. Ms. Deborah Green, Orange Audubon Society, thank you. Appreciate what you do. Audubon's important to us, part of our mission as well. Bob Stamps also, sir, with the Audubon Society. Thank you. Chandler Roser, Save Our Lakes. Great group up in Keystone Heights. City of Apopka, Diane Valores, if I read it right. Commissioner? Got it. Sorry about your name, ma'am. I'm just a B student. I missed some of those things of text. And former Chairman John Miklos, recognize him, former Chairman of the board, the governing board, and started the project that resulted in the groundbreaking yesterday for our new facility here. And Mayor Brian Nelson, sir, thank you again. Appreciate you hosting this. Nice town. I drove around this morning and yesterday, and you got a lot of territory here. 56,000 folks you got living in Apopka. Terrific. And Joe Kilshimmer, FOLA. Sir, thank you. John Grady, Public Trust. Very good. And CCUA, Ms. Goldberg. There you go. Thank you. And Aline Guy. Thank you. Good morning. George Bankson, Commissioner, City of Apopka. Hey, sir. Thank you. Met one of your colleagues yesterday, the African-American gentleman. Seemed like that's the kind of guy you like to be around, you know. Ed Bass, Apopka City Manager. Well, here's a big job. Thank you. Were you the shepherd over the renovation of this, sir? Nice job. Okay. Roll call. Burnett here. Senator Bradley.
Here.
Yes, sir. Ms. Dolan.
Present.
Mr. House. The other button, Ron. Janet Price.
Here.
Thank you. Doug Bernique.
Here.
Chris Peterson.
Here.
There you go. Mr. Oliver. There we go. Here. Contact, Ron. Good to hear you. Always appreciate your inputs. Okay, council, let the record reflect, we do have a quorum. Consideration item number 2, approval of governing board items recommended on the consent agenda. Staff, do we have any public comments on at this point? No, nothing heard. So, any board members wish to pull any items for consideration by the full board? Having heard none, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Ms. Dolan. Have a second. Thank you, sir. Mr. Peterson, second. Further discussion? Having heard none, roll call vote. Burnett, yes. Bradley?
Yes.
Thank you. Stolen?
Present, or yes.
Thank you. Mr. House?
Yes.
Thanks, Ron. Ms. Price?
Yes.
Mr. Bornick?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver?
Yes.
By your vote, you've unanimously approved item number 2, the consent agenda. Biosolids. Dr. Marzoff, approach the podium, and do we have any staff, public comments? Thank you, Lisa.
Just for clarity, do we want to go through the hydro report or go right to biosolids?
Pardon me?
Do we want to go through the hydrologic conditions report or go straight to biosolids?
Okay, sometimes the chair gets an agenda that not exactly consistent, so we don't see it here.
Oh.
All right. Let's have a hydrologic report, please.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Eric Marzoff, Director of the Division of Water and Land Resources, here to present the February hydrologic conditions report reflecting data from the month of January. The purpose of this report is to provide a snapshot of hydrologic conditions throughout the district. The January rainfall was well below average in all but the most northernmost parts of the district. 8 of the district's 18 counties had less than half an inch of rain, with Indian River receiving only 0.08 inches of rain, which is interesting. The evapotranspiration was 0.06 inches per day. So much more evaporation than rainfall. The counties that did receive the most rain was Nassau, in the most northern part of the district, received 2.8 inches of rain. In spite of the very low rainfall last month, on an annual average, the district is in the average range, but ranging from 45 to 55 inches throughout the district, and overall is about 1 inch below average. Water flow conditions throughout the district were average for this time of year on virtually all the waterways. In terms of volumetric flow rates, the St. John's at Melbourne was 116 million gallons per day, which corresponds to the 40th percentile for this day. The St. John Station at DeLand was 1.6 billion gallons per day, which is at the 56th percentile. And the St. John Station at Satsuma was 3.7 billion gallons per day, or the 66th percentile. I'll now review some changes at selected lakes around the district. Lake Brooklyn dropped half a foot during the month. Lake Weir dropped 0.1 feet during the month. Lake Apopka, which is part of a system of lakes where we regulate water levels with water control structures, stayed right at its regulation schedule through the month. Blue Cypress Lake, which is also one of our regulated lakes at the headwaters of the St. John's, dropped 0.4 of a foot during January. The upper Floridan conditions at the end of January were in the normal range throughout much of the district, with some zones still remaining in the high zone. Several of our wells are indicated with red triangles, indicating that at those locations we had more than a 10% decline from the previous month. Overall, the Floridan aquifer is at the 74th percentile. I'll next review changes in flow at select springs around the district.
Let me interrupt you a minute. Board members, if you have a comment on any of this, just jump right in. I don't need to recognize you. Certainly want to hear your comments. So if you have a question, and I know Dr. Marzoff will be glad to hear that question. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Mean monthly flow for Silver Springs was 654 CFS, a decline of 14 CFS. Mean monthly flow at Blue Springs decreased to 180 CFS, which remains in the high range for this time of year. Flow at Rock Springs is also in the high range, but declined 2 CFS for the month. Flow at Aquifer Springs dropped 2 CFS as well and is now in the high part of the normal range. This month I've included a drought forecast map, which predicts the drier than normal conditions through the spring in spite of the welcome rainfall we received this past weekend. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to address any questions.
No questions? Your questions? Looks like the West has got a real problem with the drought.
Yes.
That goes through April.
Yes.
April showers. No April showers, looks like.
Well, it'll be interesting to see with the heavy snows what the snowpack in the Sierras and Rockies provides.
Plenty of snow, but that's somewhat local in terms of the streams and all.
Yep.
Helps with water supply, but not necessarily wildfire. Have you noticed anything in Lake Mead? Do you look at that occasionally? It seems like a big benchmark for that area, because I know they get their water in Los Angeles.
I do look
Las
at that
Vegas.
periodically, and that part, the Colorado River, that area is in a prolonged drought, and you can see it in the bathtub ring that's visible around both Lakes Mead and Powell.
Good, thank you. Okay, does that complete your brief?
Yes.
Now we're at item 3, biosolids, is that next?
That's me.
Don't get come sit down, man.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Eric Marzoff, Director of the Division of Water and Land Resources. Today, I have the first of the contracts associated with our work funded by a grant from DEP on land application of biosolids and potential water quality issues for your consideration. I showed you this plot last month, which illustrates the change in the land application of nitrogen and phosphorus in the upper St. Johns Basin. And we used this data and DEP's highly detailed permit records for Class B applications and compared it with our ambient water quality network data to derive a strong circumstantial case that the land application of Class B biosolids is associated with the increase in phosphorus we've observed in locations around the upper basin. In 2018, DEP created a biosolids technical advisory committee consisting of stakeholders of environmental, agricultural experts, large and small utilities, waste haulers, consultants, non-governmental organizations, and academics. That committee was convened to examine current options for biosolids management, better ways to manage biosolids to improve the protection of water resources, and to consider what research is needed to improve biosolids management. The district presented our data and analyses at 2 of these meetings. The TAC concluded with recommendations for regulation as well as research to improve the understanding of how biosolids may contribute to water quality impairment. One of their recommendations was to conduct research on the nutrient runoff through both surface and groundwater, which is the project in front of you for consideration today. Today's items include more data collection in watersheds where biosolids have been applied and detailed study at the field scale to better understand how phosphorus moves through both surface and groundwater paths to our water bodies. And that's the blue square circled in yellow. In future months, we will also have projects to evaluate environmental remediation technologies for fields with a long history of biosolids application, And we also look at the feasibility of phosphorus recovery at wastewater treatment plants to reduce the total amount of phosphorus that winds up in the biosolids in the first place. Over the next year, we anticipate bringing 3 additional contracts for your consideration. At the end of this, we hope that we will have information to improve our biosolids permitting process, enhance phosphorus recovery, and reverse the current water quality trends we see. The district was diligent in its efforts to advertise this applied research opportunity and to solicit input on the development of the request for proposals. On July 17th, the district hosted a webinar outlining our research objectives and our intent to contract for applied research. This webinar was well attended with 42 faculty from 12 different universities attending. Ultimately, though, only one research team, a collaboration between UF and FSU, submitted a proposal. Other universities explained they lacked the relevant experience, expertise, facilities, and time to conduct the necessary research. The UF-FSU research team has significant experience in the relevant areas. You can see they have nearly 2 centuries experience amongst the 10 team members in soil and groundwater work, nearly a century's experience looking at organic compounds, and 40 years research on biosolids themselves. We determined this team to be well qualified and note that the ability to rely on UF-IFAS's agricultural extension is an additional advantage for this work. Their proposal was within our budget and addressed our requested research topics, and overall was rated highly by our team at 38.75 out of 40. The budget for this research is $604,817 with an initial planning task that will be followed by 3 research tasks and ultimately followed by a synthesis and reporting tasks. Each year in this contract will include a data delivery report. Ultimately, the investigators will present their research findings and synthesis at a symposium in February 2024, with their final report expected in April of that year. Staff request your approval of our request for proposals and reward of our contract to the University of Florida to improve phosphorus loading estimates associated with the land application of Class B biosolids, and with a not to exceed amount of $605,000. Be happy to address any questions.
Board? Yes, sir.
I guess I'm the ag guy of the board, and I've looked into this issue a little bit, and this has nothing to do with this proposal. My comments are general in nature, but I've worked on water quality issues for this basin since 1979, trying to improve the upper basin, working closely with Henry Dean and the staff here of this district to ensure a better future for this river system. And as this state has grown, I've watched Dade, Broward, Palm Beach County, and the city of Tampa truck their biosolids to our basin. They're all moving because they've all outlawed the application of biosolids into various basins south of us. And yet we have a very sensitive basin with the Indian River Lagoon and the St. Johns River system that are, we're investing tens of millions to make better every day. Lake Apopka, all of the lakes, we're working to make them a better place for our children. And we were recently on 2 big ranches that are somewhat in my backyard and in Cole's backyard, where they were doing it right. They were doing everything as prescribed by law. Had great, beautiful pastures for the cattle, applying that and doing it the right way. So my comments are not towards people that are doing it wrong. But I think we need to take, as a board, we need to take a hard look, because Florida is continuing to grow exponentially with this tremendous growth spurt we're going through, and we're going to get more of this product and all that it has inside of it, which are the chemicals everybody ingests and the long-term impacts they'll have in the dry and wet part of the biosolids. I just think we need to work closely with the utilities and encourage their next step in technology so that the biosolids are at the next level. There is technology available already that they can. It's expensive, but if they want to invest in the next level, the biosolids are a much higher grade and much safer. It's not upon us of this district, but it's upon, I think, the utilities to take that next step. And I know they're expensive for the counties of Palm Beach, Dade, Broward, Lee County, a lot of them that are shipping it towards us. I understand that. I'm in a business where every dollar hurts a citrus grower, but I think we need to be a part of that thinking process to push them to make that product better. And I hate for our river system that this governing board is to govern over to be degraded by accepting everybody else's unwanted biosolids. Because they don't want them in Dade County, they don't want them in Palm Beach, they don't want them in Broward County. They don't want to dump it in their own backyard, yet we're putting it in our backyard. And I just think we need to take a good, hard look at that. I think it deserves a broader look, and the ag folks have done it right. They're applying it right by law with DEP standards. My guys have looked into it in citrus, and we're not allowed to do it because of our trading partners. It's not allowed on fresh fruit and vegetables. You can't have it, or Europe and Japan and all our major ports that we ship to don't allow it. So we can't do it, so our guys have backed away from it in the 500,000 acres of citrus. But I just think it deserves a hard look, so thank you. But
Thank you, Doug, appreciate that input.
If I might follow up, just
Yes, sir.
real quick. You know, Doug, you talked about it's more expensive for the utilities to treat it to a better level, but I'm not so sure that in the end that it's less of a cost because it's so expensive for us to take it out of the environment once it gets there. And I think as we see over and over again, you know, remediation is tremendously more expensive than just dealing with it at its source. And quite frankly, those utilities, they're charging customers. So it is their waste that they're having to dispose of. So they really should bear the cost. It shouldn't be upon us in the St. Johns River Water Management or the St. Johns River, who takes 89% of all of the state's biosolids end up here in the St. Johns River, mostly in the headwaters.
Yep.
So
I agree 100%.
Wow. Last month, we were at the Desiree Ranch, 300,000 acres, and I saw 18-wheeler after 18-wheeler. I said, what are they doing there? Carrying off biosolids. I wonder where they were taking it to.
Yeah.
But certainly, it's something we got to look at, and that's a good input. Yes, ma'am.
I had a question. Could you go back a couple of slides to the slide that had the yellow box around the, that one, yes. So can you tell me at what point, you showed where this project with the square around, or the yellow square around it, went through 2024? Mm-hmm. Can you tell me where those next two projects, the environmental remediation and the next project, the resource recovery, where those come in, what timeline?
They're going to be a little bit delayed after this work. To your point, Doug, Mr. Bernique, We completely agree that the operators are working within their permits. We think there's a gap in the permitting framework that doesn't anticipate how the phosphorus is moving off the fields. And that's what this work is to better understand.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not talking against this research. I think
Right.
we need to do this. But I think in the bigger picture,
Yes.
we need you and the great staff here to take a hard look at how we can press the utilities to take that next step and to take a harder look, because even the gray water that's going on the golf courses along the East Coast and the old fishing holes that I know very well in the back, and the mangrove back part of any River County and Brevard County, now have algae outbreaks that never did because they've accepted gray water in the golf courses along the barrier island. And so there is a phosphorus loading coming off of that was not planned. And these were beautiful, pristine places until they started accepting the gray water. So the whole complex puzzle of what do we do when we flush our toilets is still a toughie.
Yeah.
As a society, we need to take a hard look at that and invest in it, or it's gonna really hurt this river system.
And I think that while that's a subject matter of extraordinarily complex discussion, Senator Bradley could probably help us with how you would go about that from a legislative perspective, because it seems like it's a higher order than just our district. Certainly, our district needs to take it on, but somewhere the data needs to be pushed to legislators to say, okay, do you want to make this difference?
Right.
Sir.
Just a quick question for you. I know that my colleague was asking about the circled, or the squared box in yellow, and that program's going to run to 2024. I just want to make sure that we're not talking about not starting these next two boxes, the remediation technology pilots and the resource recovery options, that we're not waiting till 2024 to start researching those. I want to be running parallel paths on all of these, not consecutive paths.
No, point taken, and you will see all of the contracts for all four of those boxes in the next, this year, within the next several months.
Yeah, anything we can do to accelerate addressing this problem is going to, I think, save the district a lot of money in the long run, because, to the point over there, it's very expensive to get it out of the system once it's in there.
Right. And this work will really help guide amending the rule framework for how biosolids are applied. And this piece will leverage what we learn and look at how what can we do on the fields or between the fields and the water bodies to prevent that phosphorus from reaching the water bodies. But I think the long-term solution is this last box, which is how can we recover phosphorus at the wastewater treatment plant? Right now, wastewater treatment plant gets a pipe in, and there are two outlets. One is reclaimed or effluent, the other is biosolids. We really need that third alternative, a resource recovery of phosphorus. And the end result then is both reclaimed water at a lower concentration that we can use as an alternative water supply, and also biosolids, which are then with a nitrogen phosphorus ratio that's agronomically sensible, that then can be a land applied to take advantage of their agronomic value that they have because of all the carbon and organics and nutrients. The challenge now is that the phosphorus is so high that when you apply based on N, which is the current rule framework, you over-apply for phosphorus. So that last piece of creating the third outlet at the wastewater treatment plant, I think is really to my mind, the most likely solution in the long term.
So what's the normal term duration for these permits? Are they 5 years, 10 years, longer?
I think it's changed. I want to say 5. but it
Five-year
might be 10.
permits?
5.
So they'll be coming up for renewal on a fairly regular basis, and there's room for adjustments. As you pointed out, there's a gap perhaps in the permitting.
Right, and part of the advisory committee's recommendation was for DEP to more closely track applicants, and I think they're doing that. I
Okay.
think ultimately amending that process for the application permitting.
Yeah, that's one way to get a handle on this and
Yeah.
start to turn things.
Yeah, Ms. Price, I agree with that. But I think we need to give them a heads up, maybe in a newsletter, hey, this is what we're looking at, we've gotten this grant, so they can see downrange for their long-range strategic plans, how to deal with biosolids, because rather than come up with an application, whoa, if you're not doing this, we can't go there, and that's probably not fair either. So we need to give them a heads up, it's coming, you got some time, maybe you want to adjust your processes, your work, your strategic plan to accommodate what probably is going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years.
I think the utility industry is pretty aware of what's going on. There's a shift in biosolids from Class B, which are what we're talking about here, which are highly regulated by DEP, to Class A, which undergo greater disinfection and essentially become characterized as fertilizer and applied there. So there's a general shift towards, from a utility perspective, towards Class A, creating a higher value product that then they can use. But there still remains that elevated phosphorus relative to nitrogen in Class A. And again, so that's, in my mind, why this phosphorus recovery at the plant, so that whether it's Class A or Class B, it's balanced in its NNP will be.
Who regulates the fertilizer application?
Then it becomes the purview of the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and the reporting for fertilizer is nothing like what you see for Class B.
Which goes to the point that if they move more and more to Class A, it's not taking the T or P out or the application of it, it's just the reporting goes down tremendously, so we don't really know sometimes where that would be even being applied within the St. Johns River.
That's correct. For the Class B permitting, we know which field, when, how much, what facility provided the material. For Class A, it will be fertilizer, which I think we learn about on a countywide basis annually. So a very different density of data available.
Okay, further questions?
Mr.
Dr. Ortel.
Chairman?
Senator Bradley's trying to be
Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Bradley, chairs recognize you, and sorry I didn't hear the call. Go ahead, sir.
That's okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Copy loud and clear. Go ahead.
Great. I just wanted to follow up on some of the things that Doug and Ron had talked about, as well as Susan. I think it's important at this moment in time to recognize why we're here in the history of what has happened. The folks in South Florida are obviously facing a lot of the challenges that we're facing when it comes to water quality. We care deeply about their concerns and the Everglades and all the things that they're dealing with. But make no mistake about it, the decision that they made was very deliberate and very straightforward. They decided this isn't going to be our problem anymore, and we're going to take this, we're going to dump it on our friends in North Florida. And that was a policy decision that was made. And I appreciate our ability to research it and understand the nuances of what is happening. And we need to do that, and I support the item on the agenda today. I'm glad that we're learning more about it. But I think that we know what is going on. There's already evidence on the record sufficient to demonstrate that this policy decision has had negative effects on the St. Johns River. So while I understand the idea of giving people heads up and windows of opportunity to address this matter, what I'm trying to understand a little bit better is, what are our authorities as a district? And this is a question directed to our attorney and our staff, because I personally would like to explore those options. For instance, do we have rulemaking authority to do what was done in South Florida? I know that was done by legislative action, but districts have have ability to do things as well. Do we put a moratorium on these activities until such time as we get further research? I would like a menu of options to get more aggressive now rather than wait more. And that's the message I want to send. And if, you know, I'm sure we'll hear from our friends in the utilities or even in Tallahassee about their reactions to those ideas. But we have to get that conversation started. So my hope is that over the next 30, 60 days, we get a better picture of what our options are as a district, and not just, you know, right now, for things we can do from a regulatory standpoint to stop this from happening.
Good input, Senator Bradley. I'm looking at General Counsel, Ms. Winkler. She's shaking her head. Tells me that she'll get back to us at the next board meeting.
I can do that, and the DEP is actually, the Department of Environmental Protection is actually in rulemaking now, and I believe their intent is to seek ratification of those new rules at this session. They made a presentation to the Senate Committee on the Environment and Natural Resources last week on those rules, so they are actively engaged, and I'm happy to provide a summary of what they're doing at our next meeting.
Specifically asking is what can we do as a district to legally? That doesn't mean that we can't be overturned. That doesn't mean that they may disagree and they may have comments. I'm just literally trying to find out what rulemaking powers we suggest. I know the DEP is doing what they're doing, and if the answer from legal is that this is completely within DEP's purview, we have no stake in the matter or no ability in the matter, then that's an answer. That would surprise me because we have authority over what goes into that river. But I just wanted to clarify my comment.
Yeah, totally agree. We need to go to war with the weapons we have, so let's see what we have from a regulatory and a legal perspective. And again, it's not a battle. It is a discussion that needs to take place about what's happening to our state. So we'll come forward next board meeting and have a good presentation on where that is. And appreciate that input, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate you indulging me. And I'm sorry I can't be there with my good friends today. I had some scheduling issues that I couldn't avoid, but I really appreciate all my colleagues and friends there. Thank you.
You bet. Got a good group. Mayor Apopka is here, and we're just excited about moving forward in partnership with this great community. Okay, staff.
Mayor's a great guy too, former representative, former colleague Brian. And
Oh, really?
I'm sorry to see him.
Good. Former state representative. I didn't know that. Terrific. Okay, well, thank you. Assistant Director Kelly, any public comment cards on this issue? Okay, item number 3, do you have a motion to approve? So moved by Mr. Bornick. Second?
Second.
Ms. Dolan, second. Further discussion? Having heard none, have a roll call vote. Burnett, yes. Bradley?
Yes.
Dolan?
Yes.
House?
Yes.
Price?
Yes.
Bornick?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
And Oliver?
Yes.
By your unanimous vote, you approved item number 3. Thank you. Item 4, the Tom Lawton Access Road. Mr. Dale Jenkins is approaching the podium now. Go ahead, sir. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Good morning, board members. Dale Jenkins, Division of Projects. I have 2 items for your consideration today. The first one is paving the Tom Lawton Access Road. This item was approved in October of 2020 as part of the Bureau of Operation and Maintenance's annual work plan for fiscal year 2020-2021. The recommendation reads as follows. Approval of the bid and award of contract to the lowest responsible and responsive bidder for paving the Tom Lawton Access Road project. The Tom Lawton resurfacing project's located west of the city of Palm Bay in the Three Forks Conservation Area. The section proposed for paving is a yellow portion indicated on the map to the right, which is nearly a mile long. The photo on the left is a Tom Lawton recreational area parking facility. The rec area is a primary access point to enjoy the expansive sawgrass marshes and open vistas in the Three Forks Conservation Area. As such, It is highly visited by the public and receives a good amount of traffic flow. This road was last paved about 20 years ago and is one of only 2 roads in the district that we routinely pave. The other one is just south of the Apopka Field Station, and that's McDonald Canal Road on the North Shore. The Bureau of Operation and Maintenance has performed temporary repairs to this road. These photos were taken last spring, and as you can see, there was a bunch of potholes. Additionally, the roadway cross-section was flat and didn't sheet flow water to the sides of the roadway during storms. This road was last paved 20 years ago, and it was only over the last few years that the Bureau of Operation and Maintenance has had to routinely pave these potholes. So last spring, rather than just patch the existing potholes, we decided to use a mixing machine attached to a front-end loader, as you can see in the photo on the left. This process mixes the existing pavement with the underlying lime rock base. Then, Operation and Maintenance staff regraded the road with the end result shown on the photo on the right-hand side. This finished project also had a little crown so the water would flow off during storm events, and this cost about $12,000. However, this repair is only temporary, which is why we're before you today requesting to repave this. The district received 2 responses to the invitation for bid. C.W. Roberts submitted the winning bid. However, it exceeded the $125,000 budget that was in the work plan. Therefore, a $55,000 budget transfer, as discussed in the board memo, is part of the funding recommendation. The reason for the increased cost is that we estimated a 1-inch asphalt surface during the fiscal year 2020-2021 budgeting process. We advertised the bid calling for a 2-inch paved surface, which will provide a longer service life of the roadway and less short and long-term maintenance. And so that brings me back to the recommendation for your consideration. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Tell me the thickness again of the road bed, the asphalt, the tar we're
Asphalt,
talking about.
2 inches, sir.
Good. 1 inch to me would be 1 coat of paint on a house. It's just asking for trouble there. Mr. House, are you up? 2 inches sound okay to you on this paving of the,
Yes, sir. I spoke to Dale Jenkins, and I agree with his request and his hypothesis, and he and Woody have done a good job specifying what pavement needs to be done.
Thank you. And I'm sure everybody knows that Mr. House has extensive experience in the DOT boards, as chair and a member, and in the development business. So he knows this piece of it quite well. Mr. Jenkins, you'd probably agree with that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, discussion, questions from the board? All right, we have a motion to approve item number 4.
Motion for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. House. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. And for discussion, having heard none, we'll call for a roll call vote. Burnett, yes. Senator Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. House?
Yes.
Ms. Price?
Yes.
Mr. Bornick?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver?
Yes.
By unanimous vote, you approved item number 4. Thank you, and don't sit down.
Thank you, sir.
Chair calls on Mr. Jenkins on minor water control structure rehabilitation. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. My last item for your consideration is approval of the bid and contract award for slip lining 4 culverts in the upper St. Johns River Basin. This also was part of the Bureau of Operation and Maintenance's board-approved 2020-2021 work plan. The recommendation reads as follows. Approval of the bid and award of contract to the lowest responsible and responsive bidder for minor water control structure rehabilitation. As local sponsor for the Army Corps of Engineers federal projects, the district is required to provide underwater inspections of all culverts that perforate federal levees and provide a report for repair recommendations. The most significant deficiencies identified were 4 metal culverts in this item for your consideration. These culverts exhibit moderate to advanced corrosion, and staff determined that the most cost-effective method of improving their condition would be slip lining. These culverts are about 30 years old. These are the locations of the 4 culverts. Structure 6A is a single 48-inch corrugated metal pipe located under levee L75 near Pump Station 6 at the southeast corner of the Fellsmere Water Management Area, or FWMA. It provides a connection between Blue Cypress Conservation Area and the FWMA. The three remaining culverts, 252A, B, and C, all lie under levee L78. L78 is an earthen levee with a lime rock cap driving surface that forms the northern border of the Fort Drum Conservation Area. It flows from Fort Drum to Blue Cypress. These three culverts are 60-inch corrugated metal pipes under L78. 252A and B are double culverts, and 252C is a single pipe. Also, 252C transitions to a reinforced concrete pipe beneath State Road 60, which is why you see the much longer length as compared to 252A and B. The slip lining process is relatively straightforward, as discussed before the board last December when you approved the Fellsmere Grade CS2 slip lining repair. In way of review, the pipe is welded together, floated into the water at whichever end the contractor feels would be the simplest to access, sunk, and then pulled through the existing culvert. The void space between the new pipe and the existing pipe is filled with grout, pumped from the surface. The ends of the pipe are plugged to help limit the grout from leaking out of the ends. The district received two responses to the invitation for bid. Central Pipe Rehab submitted the winning bid at $384,634. However, it exceeded the $300,000 budget for the project. Therefore, a $84,634 budget transfer is part of this recommendation as discussed in the board memo. We set the $300,000 budget based on historical budgets for annual culvert repairs and estimates for cleaning and slip lining 48-inch and 60-inch pipe from a previous cost proposal. The increased cost that you see here was primarily due to a larger than anticipated mobilization cost for an amphibious track hoe to do the work to install the pipe, as well as a slip lining cost of approximately 10% of an increase over what we estimated. We could have considered just slip lining structure 6A and 252A and B, and if you add the numbers real quick here, you can see that that gets to about $284,000, which is less than the budget. But we recommend rehabilitating all four culverts because the bid on culvert 252C, which you see here at $99,588, there's a good chance that might go up next year if we bid it out as a single mobilization. And so that brings me back to the recommendation on this item, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of the presenter?
I just had one quick question. Does a slip line pipe have the same lifespan as, replacing it with a new pipe?
It may be even a little bit better because I think it's HDPE pipe, so it'll probably last at least 30 years.
At least 30 years. Okay, good.
Yes, sir.
This is a dumb Bubba question, but why wouldn't DOT kick in a part of this funding? Because it's a state road.
Well, we have permission to go under State Road 60, but it's part of our work that we require to do for the Corps to repair the culverts. So this being it goes under the levee, which is why we're doing it, because it's part of our commitment to the Corps. But also going under 60, it's just a continuation. And I haven't looked into that, Mr. Bornick, and I don't know what the answer to that would be, but we're just considering a part of the same culvert, which starts going under L78.
Well, we have a very savvy governing board member that probably can help you look into that. Who's on the phone? Ron, you there?
I gotcha. I heard exactly what you're saying, and I can find that out. The reality is, and I'm not positive, I don't know the purpose of the crossings, whether we caused the purpose and they're our pipes, or we're fixing DOT pipes, and that really makes the difference. But we certainly know the right people to ask that question to.
Good enough.
Very good.
So what we can do, whenever the questions are done, we can make a motion that said approved, subject to Jenkins talking to the DOT for any maintenance matching funds for, et cetera.
I'll get the answer to 252C.
I so move Ron House's wording.
And Counselor, could you capture that in the motion? Okay, any other questions?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion, Mr. Bornick, second by Susan Dolan. And further discussion? Having heard none, we call for the vote. Burnett, yes. Senator Bradley.
Yes.
Ms. Dolan.
Yes.
Mr. House.
Yes.
And again, noted the amendment proposed by Mr. Dornick, so we get the language right. Ms. Price.
Yes.
Mr. Bornick.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Oliver.
Yes.
By your unanimous vote, you approve item number 5 with the amendment as proposed, of the adjustment to the language as proposed. And thank you, Mr. Jenkins, for your usual professional presentation. Consolidated annual report, Mr. Frick, approach the podium. Chair has recognized you for the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the board. My name is Tom Frick. I'm the Director for the Division of Strategic Planning and Initiatives, and I'm here this morning to present for your consideration the 2021 Consolidated Annual Report. Water management districts are required by statute to submit a consolidated annual report to the governor and legislature and the Department of Environmental Protection by March 1st of each year. The report, known as the CAR, combines 9 legislatively mandated reports regarding the status of water resources within the district. It should be noticed that you may recognize a number of these reports, as is over the last 5 months, we've brought a few of them for your consideration and approval. For example, the minimum flow and levels annual priority list, and also the strategic plan. I'd be remiss at this point if I forgot to thank all of the district staff who helped compile these reports. These reports do touch on pretty much every part of the district, so thank you very much to them. In that regard, I'd also like to point out that Chapter 1 of the Consolidated Annual Report is reporting on the accomplishments for the prior fiscal year for the district. And I've listed out some of the highlights that we accomplished over the past year, and this is in spite of the fact that we were in unprecedented times with the COVID-19 situation. So on the water quantity side, we brought forward a multi-year effort on the Central Florida Water Initiatives, brought that to you for consideration and in your approval. I'd also like to point out that we brought 3 minimum flow and level water bodies to you last year for your consideration and approval, and move those along. Also, in addition to the considerable amount of nutrients that we've prevented to go into water bodies throughout the entire district, I'd like to point out that there were 2 projects, one a muck removal project that removed over 189,000 pounds of nitrogen and nearly 116,000 pounds of phosphorus from the Indian River Lagoon. That was a one-time removing those. And also we removed over 7,500 pounds of phosphorus with our shad removal program. Also, I'd like to point out one of the, in spite of the COVID-19 activities, our monitoring folks were out and doing business as usual, and we had less than 2% of our regular routine sites that were interrupted due to considerations from last year. And that was information that you all relied on, not only the hydrologic report, which we saw earlier and you consider every month, but also for harmful algal blooms. So we assist with the Department of Environmental Protection along that. Our natural systems, our land folks, also were very busy last year, didn't skip a beat, over 61 prescribed burns. And then we also controlled more than 27,000 acres of invasive plants throughout the district. So that's quite a bit of activity. On the flood protection, Mr. Jenkins brought some of the efforts forward that you saw, at least on the culvert side, but we also had some considerable improvements on our levees. Over 6 miles of improvement on the L75 levee last year, so that was pretty significant. And then also on the L73, we improved the S161 and 161A structures to make sure that we're aren't eroding and also flooding folks downstream. And one thing that gets missed, Mr. Jenkins pointed this out as well, is federally we are required to inspect our structures. We have to do that semi-annually. And so staff completed those and also is completing the repairs on time. So that's quite an accomplishment. And lastly, on the supporting activities, the district contributed more than $23 million in cost share. That's district funds. That was for a total of nearly $74 million in projects. That included local, district, and also state fundings to those. So that's a significant amount of water quality improvements and also water quantity improvements throughout the entire district. But not on here, but I would like to point out is the fact that you all in the prior year's strategic plan had really challenged our cost share folks to go out and engage cost share applicants. And so of these projects, we had three brand new applicants that applied. And then we also were out and did 12 agricultural presentations to get them involved. So quite a bit of effort from district staff, and they should be congratulated for those accomplishments. With that, Mr. Chair, it brings me to the recommendation from staff for the board to accept and approve the 2021 Consolidated Annual Report.
Questions of the presenter? Sir? Okay. Do we have a motion to approve? Ms. Dolan, second?
Second.
Second down here, Mr. Peterson. Thanks, sir. Further discussion? Have we heard none? Roll call vote. Burnett, yes. Bradley?
Yes.
Dolan?
Yes.
House?
Yes.
Price?
Yes.
Bernique?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Oliver?
Yes.
By your vote, you unanimously approve item 6. Got one question for Dr. Shortell. Who's the individual that runs our prescribed burn program now?
So that's in,
Was Steve Miller, wasn't it, before he left to go to,
so the bureau chief is Brian Emanuel.
spell the
and
last name again?
Emmanuel.
Got it?
And that's in Eric's division, the Bureau of Land Resources. It would be an excellent topic for an informational item in the next little while. I think they're still doing a lot of prescribed burning right now, so they might appreciate waiting until past fire season.
Okay, maybe in April, we could look at a presentation on what they're doing, what they're covering. My biggest concern, and the reason I really even raised it, does he have all the equipment he needs when you do prescribed burns? The thing that's most concerning to the leadership in Tallahassee is we're doing it right. I'm sure we are. Can we keep it from getting away from us, and do we have the equipment to keep that prescribed burn from getting away? I've seen it happen all my life up in North Florida, and there was a private individual rolled his own equipment out to his bulldozers and other equipment that he had, which stopped it. But I know that's easy to do. We approved seemed like a Cat D6 bulldozer a couple years ago. Is there something more needed as a backup to make sure we don't get overrun with a change of wind or whatever it might be? Just have to ask the question, Counselor. You know why I'm asking it. We got to make sure that we're funded with the equipment to do something that's extraordinarily important to our communities. I'm sure Mayor Nelson would agree on that. So if you'd come back with a presentation, I appreciate it.
Yes,
Ms. Dolan?
sir.
Yes, I have a comment. I wanted to also, am I on? Am I on? Can you hear me? I also wanted to make a comment, Mr. Frick, about what's going on with the annual report, because you're right. I made some comments last year about getting out into the community, and staff really took that seriously and went out and did a lot of hard work. And that was a big thing for me, and I really want to say I appreciate the hard work that everyone did, getting out and getting more people and more municipalities engaged, and I'm really happy to see that. So great work, and I look forward to a continuation of that. So I just do want to point out that you guys listened, and I appreciate it. So thanks.
Okay, thanks for the presentation. Chair recognizes Mr. Jeff Prather, approaching the podium for the consumptive use overview or CUP overview.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Jeff Prather, and I'm the Director of the Division of Regulatory Services. It's my pleasure to be here this morning to present to you an informational item regarding the district's consumptive use permitting program. You'll remember during last month's governing board meeting, the board expressed interest in hearing more details regarding water conservation practices utilized by our regulated communities. My goal this morning is to start with an overview of our consumptive use permitting program. We will then provide additional informational presentations on specific consumptive use subjects at future meetings, starting with water conservation. Our consumptive use permits reflect a sustainable use of water that's protected for both the public and the environment for today and into the future. Our Consumptive Use Permitting Bureau is a part of the Division of Regulatory Services. It's made up of 18 staff, primarily geologists, engineers, and environmental scientists. This group works closely with all of our partners, both internal and external, to draft quality permits that builds the foundation for water supply protection in and around our district boundaries. It's important to note that not all users of water within the district require a consumptive use permit. Exceeding any one of these three thresholds on the bottom of the current slide require a user to receive a consumptive use permit. This slide represents, on the other hand, several water uses that are exempt by rule from needing a consumptive use permit. The largest use in this category is domestic self-supply wells. Throughout the district, domestic self-supply accounts for 7% of the total groundwater use at nearly 74 million gallons per day. Our staff evaluate applications for new uses, renewals, and modifications using an approach that you'll hear often in consumptive use permitting, the three-pronged test. This test is defined by statute, and some of the specifics in this criteria include: is the quantity of water necessary for economic and efficient use? Is the request a reasonable purpose consistent with public interest? Does it interfere with an existing legal user? And of course, we ensure there is no harm to the area's resources, including established minimum flows and levels of nearby lakes, rivers, and springs. Additionally, as part of the review process, the applicant is required to do an evaluation of alternative water sources that can be used in lieu of a withdrawal from the upper Floridan aquifer, our most vulnerable water resource. The most common of these alternative water sources include reclaimed water from wastewater treatment processes, stormwater, surface water, and lower quality groundwater, such as brackish water and water from the lower Floridan aquifer. And of course, the applicant or permittee must have an approved water conservation plan in place. Again, we will go into further detail about conservation with informational presentation at the March board meeting. We issue two types of consumptive use permits: individual permits and general permits by rule. The larger, more specific type of CUPs are the individual permits. Per the district's delegation policy, you can see in the first sub-bullet the criteria that requires governing board approval. Of course, any permit with heightened public concern can also be brought to the board for your approval. Below this criteria, the district's delegation policy outlines that certain staff have the authority to issue individual permits, ranging from the executive director down to the supervising hydrologist, again, depending on the size and criteria of use. Last year, 9 out of a total of 340 permits actions required governing board approval. General permits by rule simply state that if an application is doing a specific activity covered by rule and the conditions with the rule are followed, then the user qualifies for the GP. Most typical of these are environmental restoration projects and short-term dewatering activities. We currently have 2,680 active consumptive use permits throughout the district, allocating more than 1,260 million gallons a day of groundwater. The graph on the left illustrates the greatest volume of CUPs by type. You'll see that 59% of our CUPs are for agricultural operations, 21% is landscape and recreation, 13% public supply, and 7% are for commercial and industrial purposes. The right graph illustrates the largest allocations by category. Here, the lion's share of the allocation is in the public supply at nearly 815 million gallons per day, followed by ag, commercial and industrial, and then landscape and recreation. This slide shows the historic and projected water use in the Central Florida Water Initiative's planning area. Groundwater makes up 95% of the water use, with surface water use for the remaining 5%. You'll see our water demands are trending very well versus historic water use, considering the anticipated growth in population. The planning area's population is expected to have a 49% increase to 4.4 million people by the year of 2040, as indicated by the black line on the graph. Potable supply remains the largest water use category, followed by ag. Overall, water demands are projected to increase 36% to over 900 million gallons a day in year 2040. The region's efficient use of reclaimed water and implementation of conservation has contributed to offsetting the groundwater demands in this area. Currently, over 95% of treated wastewater is reused, and that's more than 210 million gallons a day. Reclaimed water flows are projected to increase by 55% to nearly 340 million gallons a day, providing even more of an offset in groundwater demands, which is very good news. This next slide represents...
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Do you
Chair
want to ask
recognizes.
questions now, or you want us to wait till the end?
Repeat that, Ron, I didn't quite get it.
Would you like us to ask questions now or wait till the end?
Jump in here, Ron, when you got one. I think that works better for the subject instead of going back. So everybody feel free, jump in when you have a point you want to make. Go ahead.
Gotcha. So, hey, Jeff, I'm going to ask Doug, but I'm going to also ask you, because a lot of times, like in agricultural permits, there's a tremendous amount of irrigation use for freeze protection and things of that nature, which is a high gallonage, but really you never use that except for a couple days a year. But you have a peak flow demand. Is that, and Doug, you probably know more about that than I do, but I didn't know if you're utilizing average daily flow or if you're using permitted volume, i.e. for peak flow demand.
Yeah, you're right, Ron. A consumptive use permit for a citrus grove, you never, unless it's the 83 freeze or the 89 freeze, or in flat areas of Florida like the East Coast, where you can flood your grove. What we used to try to do is bring the water level up to the trunk of your trees, because that water radiates out its heat and protects the crop for just that 2-night freeze event. And then you let the water out into the canal systems that surround the grove and back into the system. The water's only borrowed for 48 hours, but we haven't seen a freeze event where people crown flooded since 1989. We've gone to microjets. They're on a watering system where you're using 1/10 of the water we used to use with rainbirds and or flooding our groves. That was done 2 or 3 or 4 decades ago. So what is truly lost, the only water truly lost in a grapefruit grove is what goes out in the crop. The rest, and we have switched because of the disease of greening. We can't use the deep wells into the Florida aquifer because the TDS is too high. It's too salty. It burns the skirt of the tree and will actually reduce the tree's life because it accelerates greening. We only can use surface water, i.e. rainwater, in our local canals. So even though the growers want to maintain their ability, if we have a devastating 1 in 100 year freeze event, we never even come close to utilizing the totals in our consumptive use permits. And probably now never will because of this disease greening. It's just staying in the peninsula of Florida. We can't get rid of it. We don't have the holy grail to replace it in the way of trees that are resistant. So we're living with greening, and forever we'll never come close to utilizing what the consumptive use permit says we could use. So, Ron, did that answer your question?
It does, and I guess the question based on that goes back to Jeff. Are you using the allocation of the permitted amount in your pie charts and your graphs or use an average daily flows? Because it might be deceptive that irrigation's using more because it's permitted more for freeze protection. But like what Doug said is basically, even though you flood your fields, it's still going right back in the ground. The only thing you lose is like evapotranspiration from the trees or evaporation, but in the freeze, you don't have evaporation that much.
Got it. Ron, Dr. Shortell, General Counsel Winkler?
We, for purposes of allocation, we actually, for purposes of water supply planning, we're required to use a 1 in 10-year drought scenario. So in planning numbers of this nature, you'll see a 1 in 10 scenario. For purposes of our permitting program, we allocate to the 2 in 10-year drought. And in some areas, we're also moving to a 5 in 10 year, which is like an average condition. Particularly, we already have that implemented in our Silver Springs prevention area to kind of make sure people understand that on a typical year, they should be using that average allocation. They shouldn't be using their 2 in 10 year drought allocation every year. And that is actually the proposal in the CFWI, Central Florida Water Initiative rulemaking, is also to give a dual allocation, a 2 in 10 and a 5 in 10, to make sure our permittees understand that the drought allocation is for that drought year. It shouldn't be used every year. And that on average, to give them an idea of what their average use should be. So there's different allocations required by statute for planning, and then we have different things for permitting. So it depends really what you're looking at, what allocation we review.
Thank you, Ms. Winkler. Did you get that, Ron?
And I'll just say we also allocate, there's a max allocation for frost freeze protection that folks can also request if it's appropriate for that crop.
Looks like they're on top of what I can see. Mr. Bornick?
Yeah, just one other consideration. The margins are so thin for citrus production that growers are resistant to even use their diesel pumps to move the water. Florida is so flat, and a grower's got to move water to 100 acres of citrus. He has to use diesel dollars to move that water, and because of greening, again, that disease, the margins are so thin, people are just not utilizing their permits like they were used to 20 years ago. So the water availability is there, and I'm seeing in Martin, St. Lucie, and Indian River County, the surface levels of the Florida aquifer there have come way up. No one's utilizing it, but the utilities are licking their chops going, man, this is wonderful. We have more water here that we can use, so that the cities are looking at that. But as far as ag's use in our part of the world, it's dropped considerably.
And
Okay.
we found, from an enforcement perspective, the ag users are very good stewards because of the cost, as you mentioned, Mr. Bernie, to pump the water. They're some of our best stewards of the resource.
Okay, further questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
It seems like to me, as we grow in population and the comparison of water use and population change, it seems like the band of green on the bar graph would have to get narrower as we basically eat more ag land.
Yep.
Because really, if you think about it, you can't really grow in wetlands too much, but you grow in citrus groves, and that's great housing. I mean, maybe the trees aren't making profits anymore, but you can build a lot of houses in citrus groves because it's high and dry. So it seems like that band should be decreasing as our growth increases, if that makes sense.
Yes, it makes sense. So we're going to grow less oranges and more folks from up north.
Exactly. So it seems like that band, the green band, from 2015, 2020, 2025, 2030, that green band stays relatively consistent, where it seems like that would go down some. Just
To some
as a
degree.
Thought process. I'm not saying anything bad. It seems like that should trend a little differently.
Ms. Winkler, you want to respond there?
Sure. We actually, as part of the planning process, use what's called FSED, which the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services works to produce. So that part through statute, the Department of Ag is supposed to help us produce those estimates. So we rely heavily on the FSED product and the work that DAX does in estimating. But that is correct. We are in the CFWI area from present time to going 20 years into the future. Most of the growth is in public supply. Ag is staying about the same, but which is reflected in the graph. So, but we rely on DAX and those folks to assist us with those projections.
That's true. And Ron, don't forget, we currently use 5% of our groundwater for golf courses. As we build more communities for more people, they'll build more golf courses. And so you're going to have some offset there. Golf courses go up, maybe citrus goes down. Not sure what that relationship would be. I just know they build a community, they build a golf course.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good
Yes, sir.
job.
All right,
I
thank you, Mr.
prefer
House.
lakes. I
Thank you,
water
Council.
ski. I don't play golf. Okay, thank you, Ms. Praser. Appreciate
Oh,
that.
well, I'm not done yet. It's,
Presentation.
just-
You're not done yet?
It only gets better.
Then you better get done
Hold-
pretty
but
soon.
hold in just 20 more minutes, I swear, I'll be done.
I think I'm tired of listening before you're tired of talking, but I'll shut up. You go ahead, sir.
All right, the next slide represents the number of consumptive use permits issued by the district per calendar year. Of the 344 permits issued in 2020, 75% of those were renewals, 70 were permit modifications, and 5% were permits for new uses. The graph shows that we're in the midst of an accelerating permitting cycle, and that's over the next 3 years. It really does represent a tremendous opportunity with the projection of a large number of renewals coming in. Our staff looks forward to standing those applications up to the latest, most relevant science available and ensuring that there's a sustainable use of water for both the public and environment for today and in the future. Last slide, General. We're there. In closing, I wanted to leave you all with a positive note. As you can see, the permitted amount of groundwater from the upper Florida Aquifer, again, the most vulnerable of our water resources, has been decreasing annually since 2015 for a total reduction of just over 36 million gallons a day district-wide. In 2020, allocations were reduced by 5 million gallons per day with an additional 2.9 million gallons a day reduced from the ledger due to file closures and voluntary rescissions, which is a good thing. We're proud of this success, and we look forward to working with our partners to continue this trend of reducing upper Florida Aquifer withdrawals with the use of alternative water sources and conservation. And this, sir, concludes my presentation. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
That's an encouraging chart right there. Questions from the board?
Yeah, I had one. Could you go back one slide?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was, the downward trend in 2022 and 2023, what's the driver for that decrease there?
Well, a lot of these can be 5, 10, 20-year permits, so we have a good idea of who's coming in for renewals.
renewals.
But a lot of times they will try to come in early depending on rules that are being put in place and so forth. So we expect it'll be a busy 3 years.
Still a lot of permits.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. No.
Just want, congratulations on the turnaround of the permits from 15 years ago. That's all I heard at my end of the equation, the ag end, was it took forever. And you guys have streamlined it and have done a great job of making it quick and efficient and getting it back to the permit holder. So great job.
And by the way, I know that data because I briefed it to the secretary some months ago. We were in the 90 days to 120 or more. The bigger the permit, the longer. We're now down to, may not believe this data, 10 and a half days for the average permit. I think that was the data you got from me, Dr. Shortell. So I want to thank Dr. Shortell and the team for getting in there, helping our clients, our customers process the permit. And then when there's an error, go back and say, okay, here's how you police that up. That's a pretty big deal going to Tallahassee about the effectiveness and efficiency of government, Dr. Shortell. Your team has done that. I don't know how the other management districts do. I don't keep up with what the kid down the street's doing, but I know we're doing pretty darn well. So thank you. Number one.
I like sound stat. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Well, if you're number two, you're just a second loser. So number one is a great place to be. That's the way it works. You know? Daytona 500 is coming up, folks. That's how it works. Well, everybody remembers Chuck Yeager was the first guy to go supersonic. Nobody remembers who the second guy was or when. And he did it the second day. Bob Hoover. I've been mocked too, but it wasn't an experimental orange crate with a big jet engines on the back. That's about what Jaeger had. I still don't see how it went super. Some of the old ones, it's really a rock and roll. Oh, yeah, the 106. Okay, sorry about the side discussion there. Start talking about airplanes and the speed, I get excited. All right, thank you, Mr. Praver, and Chair recognizes Mr. Mike Register. Again, information for the MFL, Minimum Flow Levels Development and Status Assessment.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Mike Register, Director of Water Supply Planning and Assessment, and I'm mainly here today to introduce Tom Murdy, the Deputy Executive Director for the Swanee River Water Management District, who's going to provide an update on the current rulemaking that they have for the reevaluation of MFLs for the Lower Santa Fe River, Itchitucknee River, and the associated priority springs. Now, also to give you a little background on why he might be here talking about MFLs within the Swanee District. Some of the MFLs are for water bodies that were designated as outstanding Florida springs by the legislature, and also due to cross-boundary effects of pumping within our district being able to affect these water bodies. It's actually the Department of Environmental Protection that will be adopting these MFLs, so they'll be applicable in both districts. And further, because they are outstanding Florida springs, also by statute, our district could be responsible for, financially responsible for up to 25% of the recovery cost to address impacts from our district. So with that introduction, I'll turn it over to Tom Murdy to give you an update on it.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Step forward to the podium there. And again, in your district's a very important place to meet, Bob's River Place. Last of the country swimming holes in the world.
I'm pleased to be here.
Not for the faint of heart, though.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I'm pleased to be here and bring you all greetings from Live Oak. Thank you, Mike, for the introduction. And as Mike said, I'm here to present the status assessment for the proposed Lower Santa Fe River and Itchitucknee system minimum flows and minimum water levels. This presentation is a continuation of a series that had been presented to the Swanee Board over the past few months as we worked through reevaluation and peer review of the existing MFLs for that same system. Today's presentation that you will see is substantially the same as another being shown, or one being shown today at the Swanee River Water Management District by John Good, who's in our MFL office there. This PowerPoint, this presentation, has a few more slides because we gave them a refresher last month on the situation, so you all need that refresher too. So the introductory slides here will be to orient you all with the situation, with the system, because you haven't seen those things lately. We did present on this, John Good and I both, a year ago to this board. Just as an overview to orient you, this is the location of the Santa Fe River watershed outlined in black. It's shown in the context of two green areas. Both of those areas together form the North Florida Regional Water Supply Planning area, or North Florida Regional Water Supply Partnership between the Swanee River Water Management District and the St. Johns River Water Management District. The dark green area on the right is the St. Johns portion of that partnership, and the lighter green area on the left is the Swanee River Water Management District part of that partnership area. And again, the Santa Fe River fits in, it fits in that notch on the western side of the St. Johns River Water Management District. I wanted to, as part of that background, I wanted to show you how we got to where we're at, bringing you the status assessment for the Swanee River. In 2010, the Swanee River District published its water supply assessment. In that assessment, it recognized that there were groundwater level declines in northeast Florida. It recommended a regional groundwater flow model be produced or built, essentially. And so at that time, initial planning began on the MFL for the Lower Santa Fe system and the North Florida Southeast Georgia model. If I refer to that again, I'll refer to it as the NFSEG, NFSEG. Also, subsequent to that, an interagency agreement with DEP and St. John's was also entered into by Suwannee District that forms the basis of the partnership that I referred to. Between 2011 and 2013, the existing MFL studies were completed and it went to peer review. 2004, that rule was challenged at the time. That challenge was, we went through that process in 2014. In 2015, after the legislative session, the existing MFL rule became effective. And if you'll excuse me, I'll need this. Hopefully I'll keep you all listening, though. The existing MFL rule that's in place, 6240.300, says that the department, again, this is a cross-boundary MFL, so it's issued by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. And the department establishes the following minimum flows and levels for the lower Santa Fe and Itchitucknee rivers and associated priority springs. One of the key components or pieces of that rule was that upon completion of the NEFSEG model, DEP, in conjunction with the two districts, shall reevaluate the MFLs and the present status of these of the river and springs using the best available scientific or technical data, methodologies, and models. And so that's been done, and that's where we're here today. So as a follow-on to the how we got here since the publication of the existing rule, in 2016, a stakeholder advisory committee composed of stakeholders from both sides of the partnership unanimously recommended the North Florida Regional Water Supply Plan. That plan was approved by both district governing boards in 2017. And in 2018, we started work on the reevaluation of the lower Santa Fe system. 2019 saw the completion of the NEFSEG model and the draft lower Santa Fe system MFL report at the end of 2019. Last year, 2020, the peer review was ongoing, and we went through several peer review meetings, and we completed the MFL report. I want to note here that this also included peer review responses and addressing separate stakeholder comments from the partnership areas. One of those stakeholders has let us know that they felt our responses were not complete. This was, I think, was a result overall of a misunderstanding in how the comments were presented, but in any case, we'll address those moving forward. I want to show the major differences between the existing MFL, the one that's in place now, and what's proposed. One of the things that is part of that is there's a new hydrologic starting point. We've got the NEFSEG in place that allowed us to do what we call a reference time frame or a reference flow that shows that presents the system as unimpacted, and then modeled uses are subtracted from that estimated unimpacted use. We also expanded our in-stream habitat evaluation in the Santa Fe River. So we updated the river model. That's called HEC-RAS. I'm not sure what it stands for, but it comes from the Corps of Engineers, with updated geometry of the river bottom. And we also are using new habitat modeling software with additional analysis tools. We use something called PHAB-SIM on the first go-around. This one uses SEFA, S-E-F-A. I'm not sure what that stands for either. If you've got a question, I can take them anytime.
Yes, sir. Of the spring, and I think I swam in every spring along the Santa Fe River. I made it a business to do that over 3 days. It seemed like Itchitucknee's colder, is it? Or are they all still 76 degrees or whatever they are? But that,
They should all be 72 degrees still, I think.
how cold?
72 degrees
Yeah,
Fahrenheit.
72. That's cold water, summertime or not. But you preside over some beautiful, beautiful springs in Florida,
Thank
and
you, sir.
particularly Itchitucknee. So
It's an honor, yes.
be gentle with them.
Mr. Bernini.
Yes, sir. The water temperature on the Itchitucknee, how can we ever adjust that or change that? Why is that important of an issue?
Okay, I'll get right to it on this slide. So I wanted to point out that we also added a new reference gauge at the US 441 bridge across the river. During the interim period, we were able to collect more data, so it was sufficient to be able to use that gauge. And then I think to to your point about water temperature on the Itchituckney, one of the comments that we got from the last peer review was it didn't speak to manatees using the Itchituckney River as a thermal refuge. And the question there is, or the question that we were looking at is, we know that manatees do use it, not quite as much, actually not anywhere near as much as is seen in Volusia Blue Spring, for example, but they are using it. The challenge is that when the water levels get low, we had to evaluate both the temperatures in the river and how much room there was in the Itchituckney River as it entered the Santa Fe River to see if the manatees would have room to get up into the Itchituckney and benefit from that thermal refuge. So we incorporated both temperature and water levels in that assessment.
Good. They're beautiful creatures. I'm sure you know they're not indigenous to Florida. They came from the West Indies.
I think I've got this slide as well later on, but I wanted to show it again, is how do the proposed MFLs and the existing ones compare. This is shown at the three reference points, the Santa Fe River near Fort White, which is just downstream from Ginny Springs, the US Highway 441 bridge location, which is just north of High Springs on the Santa Fe River, and the Itchituckney River at US Highway 27. I think the main thing to see here is that the difference, the reference flow is what I referred to before as the estimated unimpacted flows. The MFLs, which were presented to our board last week, are in the second line. They're shown in cubic feet per second. The difference, the line highlighted in red, is the amount of allowable impact, essentially. And so the amount of allowable impact is roughly comparable. On the Fort White location, 103 CFS for the proposed versus the existing of 106. For US Highway 441, which isn't in the current MFL but is new, there isn't a comparison there, so that's shown as not applicable. And the impacts, or the difference for the Itchituckney River goes from 11 to 10 CFS. So they're relatively close to what it had been before. The fourth line shows the difference in million gallons per day as a reference, but we have been using cubic feet per second for the period of time. The relative flow reductions in percentiles are also relatively close, 8.1 for the proposed versus 8% at Fort White, 2.8% at the Itchituckney River versus 3.1%. This links us to the change from the NFSEG model due to pumping, but we'll come back to that as I get into this, the status assessment process. And so that brings you up to speed, hopefully, with where we left our board last month. And so what are the next steps after the MFL document is prepared and come through peer review? And so the next step is to do a status assessment, to assess the status of those water bodies that we just saw, the Santa Fe River in 2 locations and the Itchituckney River. One of those, after that, we would, depending on the results of the status assessment, which you will see, that would implies the development of a prevention or recovery strategy as appropriate, and then rule development by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection with assistance from the water management districts.
Thank you, sir. You represent a superb district and so many communities over there in the Swan River District and the Springs that you have purview over, just a national treasure for this state.
Thank you. I wanted to see the question here, how do MFLs fit into the overall water management in Florida water law? Is MFLs are used to determine the water needs of natural systems. This is, also includes water supply assessments that are conducted as part of the water supply planning process, and they inform our water supply planning and the district's progress in fulfilling legislative intent as embodied in regional water supply plans. It is the intent, and as that's stated here, it's the intent of the legislature that sufficient water be available for all existing and future reasonable beneficial uses in the natural systems, and that the adverse effects of competition for water supplies be avoided. I wanted to talk to cross-boundary withdrawal effects as well in terms of a background. Waters in Florida are waters of the state, but are managed and allocated through regional water management districts. And regional means just that planning may involve just more than one water management district, as we've seen with the North Florida Regional Water Supply Partnership and the Central Florida Water Initiative as examples. Water is allocated to water use applicants through the permitting process and is not allocated amongst water management districts. Water management districts also were established on surface water drainage basins back in 1972, and groundwater basins, which feed water to springs, may differ from surface water basins, and in fact they do. As groundwater use in the state has increased over time, it became apparent that groundwater withdrawals in one district had the potential for a cross-boundary or cross-district impacts. That's why we have the North Florida Regional Water Supply Partnership that was between the Suwannee River and the St. John's Water Management District. As noted, the Central Florida Water Initiative between the three southern districts in the state is also another example of this. In addition to MFLs supporting water supply planning, MFLs are also used for permitting. And in the case of an MFL where a water body has the potential to be impacted by withdrawals in another district, an MFL is developed jointly, as this one was. In the current case, the two districts, Suwannee and St. John's, our joint groundwater model was a key component in that effort. MFL use and water allocation, in order to obtain a water use permit from the respective districts or renewals or modifications, an applicant must provide reasonable it's not just an MFL that guides whether or not a permit is issued. There, and I won't go into it, but it's one of 9 other criteria that are evaluated for the issuance of a permit. Mr. Prather alluded to some of those things in his prior presentation. Coming back to our main topic is the status assessment. And why do we conduct one when an MFL is established? And the reason for that is we're directed to in Florida statutes. So the MFL establishment is to be accompanied by an evaluation of the current and 20-year projected status of the water body or water bodies. If the existing flow in the water body is below or is projected to fall within 20 years below the applicable minimum flow, the department or governing board shall concurrently adopt or modify and implement a recovery or prevention strategy. And to break it down a little bit further, I'm presenting it here kind of like a traffic light illustration. So if MFLs are not met, that implies a recovery strategy is needed. If an MFL is being met currently, but is expected to fall below the MFL during the next 20 years, then the yellow arrow means that a prevention strategy is needed. And if MFL is being met or expected to be met over the next 20 years, then no recovery or prevention strategy is needed. Once again, just to re-step you, I'm going to orient you back into the Santa Fe Basin so that we can look at our locations.
Can I get a copy of the slide before and this slide?
Certainly. You can.
Stan, would you get that for me? Thank you.
So that was a repeated slide, but we pretty much zoomed in on the Santa Fe Basin itself. It's broken into 2 sub-watersheds. The colors they look a little bit better up on the screen, but not so good on my hard copy here. On the left-hand side, it's a slightly darker green. That's the lower Santa Fe Basin. And then on the right-hand side, a very light green is the upper Santa Fe Basin. That had an MFL established in 2007. The compliance points, or the reference gauges in that basin, are the Worthington Springs gauge and the Graham gauge. On the lower Santa Fe, the compliance points, or the reference gauges that we mentioned, are the US Highway 27 gauge for the Itchituckney River. I think I'll remember to use the pointer here.
Is there a spring actually at Worthington Springs?
There was one. Let's see, I gotta back up. Actually, we'll zoom in on that location. That might make it easier. So the Itchituckney River at US Highway 27, the Fort White location, again, near downstream of Ginny Spring, July Spring, and the US 441 location on the upper end of the basin, just downstream of Olino State Park. The existing rule, as a reminder, just has the Fort White and the Itchituckney gauges in it. And for the reevaluation, due to the availability of data, we've been able to make use of the gauge near High Springs on US 441, which is appropriate based on the changing character of the river channel along its length in that reach versus downstream nearer to Fort White. There are 6 priority springs on the Itchituckney River, the upper end of the river, but it's classified as a springs group for the purposes of the outstanding Florida springs. There are 11 springs on the Santa Fe River, 5 of which, the ones that are highlighted in, all the priority springs are shown as yellow. The ones that are circled in, I guess that's a green or turquoise color, are the outstanding Florida springs in that part of the system. But the Itchituckney itself counts as a single one of the 6 outstanding Florida springs in the system that we're looking at. These associations are shown on the following slide. There's a table, so the lower Santa Fe River at Fort White includes those springs on the left-hand side. The lower Santa Fe River, or they're associated with that location. The lower Santa Fe River at US 441 is associated with Hornsby, Treehouse, and Columbia Springs. And the Itchituckney River at Highway 27 is associated with the 6 springs that are up in the state park.
Where's Orange Springs? Is that our district or your district?
We have,
South of Ocala?
not, if it's south of Ocala, it's not in our district. We've got an orange.
Actually, it's north of Ocala. So that's our,
That's in St. John's.
I think that's on private land. I tried to swim it, and they said I couldn't until I told them what I did, and they said, well, how long would you like to swim? But I think they told me it was on private land.
Yes, it is. This is a repeat, a simplified repeat of the earlier table we saw showing the proposed flow values for the lower Santa Fe and Itchituckney rivers. Again, that the difference the difference between the unimpacted flow and the MFL is shown highlighted in red, and that's the key location to focus on. The results, as we had seen earlier, haven't changed much. Moving forward from this, and I've stripped out the existing columns in here, so this is just the new proposed values for the proposed MFL. Let's see.
Big numbers at 2040.
Yeah, I've had to get my sheets right. So this table shows the status for the for the 3 river gauges. And again, this is in, at the top, it shows that it's in CFS, or cubic feet per second. That's the units of flow that we're looking at. The current 2015 impact, as developed with the NEFSEG model, was 70.7 for the lower Santa Fe River at Fort White. So the net is 32.3. So it is, it is currently meeting the MFL as based on the model. Also, the lower Santa Fe River at US 441 has a current impact of 48.9 versus that RTF number in the first column of 50. So it's also currently meeting it by a very small amount, and this is as of 2015, recall. The Itchituckney River has an RTF the RTF less the MFL flow was 10 cubic feet per second, and the current 2015 impact is 15.4. So that shows that it's in recovery. I think I'll present this just in terms of the the colors we used on the previous slide of the traffic light. It shows that the Itchituckney River would be shown to be in recovery, but both, based on the 2040 expected impacts, both Lower Santa Fe River and Lower Santa Fe River at Fort White and at US 441 are shown to be in prevention based on the expected water use from now up until 2040. And as compared to the existing status, the existing MFL currently shows that the Lower Santa Fe River at Fort White is in recovery and that the Itchituckney River is also in recovery. So the introduction of the NEFSEG model, which is our best tool for evaluating impacts of the upper Florida aquifer in North Florida, came up with the difference, the main difference for why we've got prevention on those two Lower Santa Fe systems and a slightly higher recovery than we had before on the Itchituckney. So a recovery prevention strategy is required as a result of that analysis, and a recovery prevention strategy must be adopted concurrently with the MFL. It must be expeditiously implemented and include a phased approach or timetable, which will allow for the provision of sufficient water supplies, again, for all existing and projected reasonable beneficial uses, including development of additional water supplies and the implementation of conservation and other efficiency measures concurrent with and to the maximum extent practical to offset reductions in permitted withdrawals. The goal of the prevention strategy is to achieve recovery to the minimum flow or minimum water level no more than 20 years after the adoption of a recovery or prevention strategy. That's in the case of recovery, or to prevent the existing flow or water level from falling below the established minimum flow or minimum water level for those locations that are in prevention. And that strategy must include consideration of water resource and water supply development, additional regulatory measures above and beyond what we have now, and additional water conservation measures. The next steps now then are the development of a prevention strategy for the Santa Fe River and a recovery strategy for the Itchituckney River. Rule developments will be spearheaded by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, and technical assistance will be provided by both Water Management District staff. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions from the board?
Just a comment. I've been following your modeling initiative for quite some time. Forest landowners are very interested in the benefits for groundwater recharge that the abundance of timberland in that part of Florida provides. And we've been, I believe there's been some comments to help tune the model to understand and recognize how those things contribute to the recharge side of the equation. We talk a lot about consumption and planning for future supply and protecting these waterways. And what doesn't get talked about, I think, as much is the recharge side of the equation and how land use, and particularly timberland use, has a value and a benefit that goes beyond just growing trees in terms of providing those opportunities to get water back into the aquifer. And I bring it up because the Suwannee District, I know, has had some really interesting cooperative projects with forest landowners to do some of those things. But there's a much greater opportunity out there, I believe, to incentivize forest landowners to continue to maintain that land use and preserve the value not only of the production of the timber crop, but to get the water back into the ground in a way that is as natural as it gets in that part of Florida. So I would just encourage both the Suwannee and our district to continue to think about that growing interest. There's a name for it. It's ecosystem services. There's been some discussions, they're very early around the state, of how can there be a better framework to encourage and incentivize those kinds of land uses. And I would just recognize again the cooperative projects that I'm familiar with, particularly Brook Sinks, which is very interesting. Sometime you might want to tell our board how that project took place. Very large recharge project. Brook Sink is the largest sinkhole in the state of Florida, and it's on private timberland, and it had been ditched and drained around it, and with cooperation from the Suwannee District, and Ann was instrumental in getting this project launched. We got some money to route the water back into the sink, where it goes, basically fills up during a big flood event and recharges right to the aquifer. So that's an interesting and unique one, but there are other broader opportunities that I think we should be considering.
Yes, that is probably the most cost-effective recharge project that any water management district will ever get done. And
Thank you, Ann.
For the record, over the weekend, there was a 3 to 4 inch rain in Bradford County. We finally got, it's not an easy place to monitor. We put monitoring in the bottom of the sink last year sometime. The water level in the sink came up from 13 to, relative terms, 13 to 50 feet in the last 3 days. So, and that water is just waiting to get recharged now.
Right.
So, again, really cost-effective project. I wish there were more sinks like that we could leverage there, and there are a few.
But there's a lot of timberland,
Yeah.
and that has the same value. It's just a slower process.
Yeah, there are some other really, some with not quite that potential, but close. And I'd also like to note that we're undertaking research on a timber company's land right now with the University of Florida to do just that. It's starting right now, but we'll be working on that or the University of Florida will be working on it over the next 3 to 4 years.
Excellent, thank you.
Big industry in Florida and important like the other industries are.
Yes, sir.
And that's why Doc Shortell's Black Creek project is important. Because if we bring the floodwaters from South Prong of Black Creek down to Keystone Heights, that's going to help with the MFLs, and that helps JEA in North Florida. Because if you flush a toilet up in Jacksonville, it comes right out of Keystone Heights. And I think part of our mission strategy is to get that done, and we're working on that. Thank you for your presentation today, sir.
We'll be looking at that project as well as a model for how we're going to be moving forward.
You bet. Do we have a public comment now for this presentation?
We do have a public comment if you would like to take it now, or a general public comment, but it is regarding this item number 8.
Okay, if it's regarding this item, then let's recognize and pronounce the name.
All right, Mr. Jeremy Johnson.
Sir, you're recognized. Mr. Johnson's approaching the podium for public comment relative to, looks like MFL's item 8.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and governing board members. Before I make a quick comment on this agenda item, I want to point out on the biosolids item, CCUA produces a Class AA biosolid, of which we began investing in that 15 years ago. Significant investment in a public utility to make sure we're doing it properly. Along with representing CCUA, I work closely with the members of the fellow utilities in the North Florida Utility Coordination Group. 8 North Florida utilities make up this group, and they are CCUA, JEA, GRU, St. Johns County Utility, the cities of Neptune Beach, Atlantic Beach, Jacksonville Beach, and the town of Orange Park. Collectively, the customers we serve total roughly 1.2 million people and thousands of businesses in North Florida. We consider the publication of this assessment of the status of this MFL concerning. We have expressed our intention to work with the Suwannee District staff in the development of these MFLs on many occasions. Based on the poor response, I perceive our efforts have not been well received. For example, the North Florida Utilities prepared and submitted comments to the Suwannee District staff on January 20th, 2020. In early January 2021, we received responses to stakeholder comments. The Suwannee District staff only responded to our summary page while ignoring 13 pages of technical content. The North Florida utilities have serious and significant issues with the scientific and technical foundation of the assessment of the status of this MFL. Several of our comments on the MFL were consistent with the Suwannee District's own peer reviewers, as well as other stakeholders. Along with our comments being largely ignored, we do not consider the peer reviewers and other stakeholders' comments adequately addressed either. This MFL was first adopted in 2015 by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Even then, stakeholders knew and understood this MFL required additional scientific evaluation and development of sound public policy approach. Since that time, the Suwannee District has approved 120 new and modified consumptive use permits. These new or modified cups translate into a net increase of 7 MGD of water supply allocation in relative proximity to the MFL in question, further impairing these water bodies. The Florida Springs and Aquifer Protection Act, as previously mentioned, requires the St. John's District to provide a minimum of 25% of the total project cost to address these MFLs. I understand the Suwannee District is exempt from this funding requirement. Based on these facts and the significant investments the public utilities are already making in alternative water supply development, the Suwannee District may adversely impact many people given the potential size and costs of the projects without the support of sound science or public policy. Given the stakes to protect Florida's natural resources and the cost to all of us, we have a vested interest to make sure the science supporting these MFLs is sound and they support rational public policy. The North Florida utilities respectfully request the support of this governing board and that of the St. John's District staff in requesting the Suwannee District return to a process that meaningfully engages public stakeholders aimed at scientifically defensible MFLs and sound public policy. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for the presentation, sir, and I'll ask Dr. Shortell to review your comments, and we'll proceed accordingly. Again, thank you. All right, move on to information item 9, Mr. Rockwell on the investment report. You're recognized for a short report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
Take your time.
Governing board members, my name is Greg Rockwell. I am your accounting director. My pleasure here today to report and present the highlights of agenda item number 9, our investment report. The full presentation as prepared by Public Trust Advisors is included in your governing board packet. Today I'm going to present a condensed version, but I will use the same page numbers just so if you were to follow, it would make it easier. Mr. John Grady with PTA is here today. Should you have any questions of his report? Just as a reminder too, Public Trust Advisors, they manage our long-term investment portfolio and for our district's long-term expenses and reserves, whereas the accounting office, we manage the day-to-day cash and our liquidity needs for the short term. Okay. In this slide here, we can see that the investment yield is 1.37 as of December 31st, 2020, and the duration was 1.95 years. If we compare that to October 1st, 2020, you can see that the duration is going up and the investment yield is going down. That's because when we have maturities, we are having to invest those at rates that are lower of the economy. In the bottom pie chart there, you can see 99.5% of our individual district investments are AA rated or better. So can't get much better than that. This slide here, we can see we have a well-diversified and we already said it was highly rated portfolio here. And 42% of our individual investments holdings are at a book value of 1.75% or better. In the far right column, you can see that the district's investments are all in compliance with our district policy and with state statutes. This slide here, this illustrates the current labor market and the unemployment rates. The top chart, you can see that the economy lost 22 million jobs March through April. Then it recovered 12.3 million jobs from May through November. And this is all through having uncertainty in the job market, and we keep having renewed restrictions for COVID. In the bottom chart, we have a nationwide unemployment rate that dropped to 6.7% in November from an April high of 14.7%. And Florida's unemployment rate, which is in the green line, went from a pre-pandemic low of 2.8% to an April of 20 high of 13.8%, and then came back down to 6.4% in November. This next slide here shows that the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, is below the Fed's 2% target rate. You can see in that red box. So interest rates will not rise until our economy gets back up to the 2% level that the Fed would like to see. In the bottom chart shows that the GDP, gross domestic product, contracted the most ever since it was recorded in 1947, and then quickly rebounded just as fast in the same year. And the strength and speed of the economic recovery will depend upon consumer and business spending. In this last slide, we can see the interest rates for the U.S. Treasuries, which are at historically low levels. Back where we saw back for 10 years, they were low levels. Well, they're back there now, and they are expected to remain low for the near term as the market evaluates economic recovery efforts, the government stimulus, and efficiency and effectiveness of the new COVID vaccine. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and Mr. John Gray of the PTA is here.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Appreciate the good work. Thank you, sir, in the back, for good work you're doing for us. Okay, that concludes item 9, information only. Item 10, public comment. I think we have a presenter.
Yes, sir. We have two cards for public comment. First, I have Ms. Linda Moss of Tavares.
Chair recognizes Ms. Linda Moss for 3 minutes. Moss is approaching the podium now, and when you get there, ma'am, if you'd state your name and city for the record, and you're recognized for 3 minutes.
I'm Linda Moss. I'm from Tavares, Florida. I live on the Apopka-Beauclair Canal that comes right off of Lake Apopka and goes right into the Harris Chain of Lakes into Lake Beauclair. I've lived there for 28 years. I had 9 foot of water behind my house to put my boat up until 2004 when we had the hurricanes. And then I still didn't have muck behind my house until about 2 weeks later when someone decided to open the lock and the dam and send everything that they held back up in Lake Apopka downstream, which was 623 acre feet, if you know how much that is. That's enough to fill the Empire State Building. So therefore, the residential canals were filled to the top in the community of Venetian Village. We have about 250 homes there, but one of the canals that's by my house goes about 3.5 miles all the way back to Shirley Shores, another subdivision. And we're a community of about $250,000 to $750,000 homes. Not that it makes any difference on what the value of the home is. the tragedy is what we've all lost and what we lost then. Eventually, 10 years later, after we all sat on muck, we finally got a small dredging. They passed it off as the Lake Beauclair dredging project. And so therefore, there was some dredging done there. I believe that DEP and St. John's paid for that then, but you'll have to double check with your officers now. The thing of it is they came in to our residential canals as an afterthought then, and they took out 4 feet of the 9 feet that was in there and said they didn't have any more money. So that's how we were left all these years and with the smell. My way of life and all of my neighbors' way of life has disintegrated entirely since that time. But then come Hurricane Irma, 2017, we have another event, and with that comes more muck, comes more sediment, and comes directly into our canals, more than even goes out into Lake Beauclair. So I have fought that. I have Lake Jam Clean Water Project that has been brought about by this. And there are, of course, the neighborhood. We have about 300 and some members, plus all of the fishermen. I am a fisherman, and I belong to all the clubs. And our fishing has been just incredibly hurt in that area. So I assume that you all do cover the Harris Chain of Lakes, because this has really, really put a downfall on the Lake Beauclair and Lake Dora fishing, and the FWC has been involved. The Harris Restoration Council, while they were still in business until somebody sunshined them, was right in this, right on it, and they were really working with Lisa to come up with a solution, because we can't even dredge because it's going to happen again. So until there is a resolution found, I'm begging you to please bring in the Corps of Engineers, because your engineers are not capable, apparently, of finding a resolution. Now, I didn't have a muck problem until year 2000, remember that. So there is a reason. There has to be a way. I've been on the water my entire life. I've been in sediment and muck and other places, but I've never seen anything like the liquid muck that sits on the bottom of Lake Apopka. I'm asking you to please, as a board, to bring in the Corps of Engineers to help us, because this is my life. This is 13 years of my retirement life spent on this subject. To the point where I have no life anymore to speak of. So if you would please help us, I really beg of you, and to help save the Harris Chain of Lakes. You know, you're transferring the muck from Lake Apopka for the restoration. It's just been transferred down to Lake Beauclair and Lake Dora. I mean, that's where it's at, and bravo, because, you know, everybody is glad of it. They don't have the expense of dredging it. Let it go. So, you know, and I have one question that
Ms.
I
Mock,
would like to know.
I've been very generous in time.
And you have.
You're 3 minutes over, so please bring it to a close.
I will,
We
and
sense your
thank you.
passion, we get it.
And thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
I have one question that I would like to know. I would like to know that when any pumping at all goes on the north shore of Lake Apopka, I'd like to know where the water and where it gets pumped to. I'd like to know exactly where the pumping is going on and where out in Lake Apopka this is getting pumped to. I'd like to know the answer to that question today.
I'm not on trial here, ma'am. I appreciate the input. I'll defer to staff for that, but that's not what we do.
I understand,
So,
but
thank you
I'd
for
like
the
to.
position,
I
but,
wanted to bring it up.
Yeah,
Thank you
we
very
got it.
much, but
And-
please
and-
call
And
the
listen,
board.
we've looked into this. Chairman Miklos before me has looked into it extensively. Our legal staff looked into it. Our experts looked in. Ma'am, with just the strongest conviction I can make, this is not our liability.
Sir, I'm not-
Perhaps have you
I'm not
presented
even
to-
saying
well,
it
no, no,
is
no.
at this
We're not
moment.
arguing, I'm talking.
Yeah.
Perhaps you need to make a presentation to the Corps of Engineers, because it is not ours. It looks like, from what I can tell, I'm not an expert, that your original developer miscued on how they set this up, and it's set conditions, so when a hurricane comes, you get what you got. We didn't do this, our staff says we didn't do this. We tried to do everything we could to see if there was some opportunity for mitigation. It's not legally there. We cannot do that. We don't have the authority to do it. And maybe you take your case to the head of the Water, Corps of Engineers in Jacksonville, and maybe they look at something they can do. So
Sure.
thank you.
May I just say that,
Ma'am, it's not for debate. I appreciate your input. That's it.
okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate you listening. We have new board members
Yes,
I
ma'am.
thought might be
Yes,
interested.
ma'am, thank you. Okay, Assistant Director Kelly has another public comment, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Commissioner Kevin Cannon of Winter Springs.
Commissioner, I think, met you yesterday, I think, at the groundbreaking. Were you there? Another John Wayne-looking individual, huh? Okay, sir. Chair recognizes you, and you appreciate you being here in your public service as well, Commissioner.
I guess it's afternoon, slightly afternoon. It's nice to meet all of you. The only governing board member I do know is Member Dolan, because she lives in our neck of the woods. We thank you very much for all that you guys do to protect our waterways and our water supply. I wanted to mention, so I'm not here really in an official capacity on behalf of the city, but our city in December adopted a real pro-conservation initiative. We had a planning meeting on that, and there's more to come, and we're going to be reaching out to your staff to work with us. Our city borders on the south side of Lake Jessup. And so we're going to be working a lot more with the district on those water quality issues and how we can be a better partner in that regard. But a neighbor of mine, Art Gallo, who's a retired naval officer and engineer, on his own initiative did a 13-month study of the Hunter Smart system. These are the smart water irrigation control systems. I wanted to bring this to your attention. I know he had been communicating with Deirdre Irwin, but in a 13th-month period in 2019, and single family home right around the corner from me, literally right around the corner. His 13-month water irrigation was 147,340 gallons. By implementing this Hunter Smart system in the same 13-month period, 2020, he reduced it to 23,590 gallons for an 84% reduction in irrigation utilization using these smart systems. And I understand the district has a cost-sharing program on things of this matter. We're going to probably I'm going to ask my commission to launch an initiative to do this. We have too many of our residents using potable water for irrigation, and we're 90% residential community. And we're going to look at this and look at partnering with the district to see how quickly we can bring down some of that potable water utilization using this technology. And I thank you for, I haven't had any dialogue just yet, nor has our commission, but we're going to be doing it shortly. We're looking at ways to conserve potable water, and we think this might be a very smart one. I don't know if the district has ever considered regulations mandating systems like this going forward. I don't know exactly, and I'm not your...
That would be up to the municipalities.
Okay.
In terms of mandating, but we certainly
we're
appreciate your interest in water conservation.
I'm going to bring it up because I know that's very important to the district. And so when Art brought this information to my attention, I thought I would stop by since you guys are here today.
Sure.
And share it with you. So thank you very much, and thank you for all the good work that you do.
Thank you, Commissioner, for that presentation. And all of us need to do better at water savings and water recycling. So thank you for that. That takes us down to governing board comments. Ladies and gentlemen, comments? Thank you. Next item, 25, Executive Director's Report, Dr. Shortell. You're recognized.
Thank you, General, members of the board. First off, I'd like to pass my time over to our General Counsel, Mary Ellen Muckler, for an update.
As required by district policy, I am to report to you any new lawsuits that we received since the last board meeting. In your black folder, there's a very short summary. We did receive, we were named in a lawsuit filed in Duval County in the last week. It appears to be a matter involving a property dispute between a homeowner and a homeowners association and a lot owner. We were named in the lawsuit primarily because we have a conservation easement that is part of the dispute. There appears to be a slight encroachment into that easement. As the property ownership dispute is resolved, it'll likely be that we'll resolve our issue with regard to the conservation easement. So they're not asking us for anything at this point. We've just been named because we have a property interest. But this isn't the first time we've had a case like this where there's been a dispute and there happened to be a conservation easement in the middle of the dispute. But they usually work themselves out and we get things taken care of. But I did want you to let you know that that had been filed last week. That's all I had on that.
Thank you, appreciate that. Dr. Shortell.
Thank you. I understand I'm on borrowed time, standing between you and lunch boxes, so I'll be brief.
Take all the time you need, ma'am.
Thank you.
We appreciate you.
Next slide. So our February Employee of the Month, LaDonna, the team's meeting that we had to announce this, she's the one right in the middle of this screen with a nice big grin on her face. She is a senior business support specialist and in our Palatka office and the Office of Business and Administrative Services. She is very well thought of by her peers and by all of us who are the beneficiaries of the work that she does. She's very adaptable and flexible. She overcomes obstacles creatively without making a big fuss, right? So instead of saying, well, we can't do it because of all of these things, she's like, let's, turn this on a dime a little bit and do it a little bit differently. So she's solution-oriented, and that's what we all aspire to be, to get our jobs done. She works across our organizational boundaries, from a staffing perspective, which is probably a very, very important attribute, right? To be flexible and to look for solutions. She especially supports the needs of finance, procurement, and facilities, and she's positive and optimistic, and everyone loves working with her. Congratulations to LaDonna.
Looks like the kind of person we all like to be around.
Absolutely. Not very long ago, a couple weeks ago, we were invited by the Florida Cattlemen's Association to tour a couple of ranches in the Upper Basin. Here's a few of the pictures from that day. It started out very foggy, but we were happy to join in that tour, and many of you participated. We appreciated that. I certainly learned a lot about the land and water stewardship of our ranchers. Very impressed on lots of different fronts. And we also got the bonus of getting to see Taylor Creek Reservoir and the associated areas of agriculture for those teacups that you approve each and every month.
That was a fabulous tour. Most people don't understand it. We do have a 300,000-acre ranch in Florida that's managed by people very concerned about water use and environment, and another 100,000-acre ranch. That was the Desiree Ranch, and then Billy Kemper's Kemper family, small 100,000-acre ranch.
Deer Park.
Just people so concerned about the environment, what they're doing, how efficient they're using our water supply. That was well-earned tour. Thank you.
Thank you. Our chemistry laboratory in Palatka has once again shined in what turned out to be a virtual assessment this year. So they are, I think I've already reported on the fact that when we were initially shut down with the pandemic, our monitoring folks were still out in the field, collecting data, bringing in samples, what were we going to do about the laboratory, and they proactively went to 2 shifts and have done a fantastic job in keeping that laboratory going and really adapting to the year that all of us have been in, and they remain right now on 2 shifts because it's working out fabulously for everybody. Meanwhile, the need for audits of laboratories and the like, that doesn't go away. I mean, it's the audits that provide that third-party look-in to ensure the integrity of the data upon which all of the scientific analyses that we do that then back up the recommendations that we make to you all. These are important things. This was done virtually this year. They passed with flying colors. Again, their track record is outstanding. And if I may, I just want to read the comments from the lead assessor. No concerns. This was a very well-organized laboratory with very knowledgeable staff. The electronic processes you have in place are excellent in preventing errors in quality. All data were easily retrievable and traceable in your current systems. Congratulations on a job well done. Congratulations to the laboratory.
Please pass along the board's appreciation to your team that's making that happen. And also, as you know, if you have a laboratory, you need to modernize it. Doesn't matter if you got it yesterday. So make sure you keep the board apprised of what technologically advanced equipment they need to continue to do this good work. I've seen some of these labs. The National Guard has a mobile lab. It's not that big a vehicle. Probably has $2 million worth of lab equipment in it for analyzing all sorts of things in the air, whereas you're analyzing mostly things in the ground. So bring that to us. We'll look at it. We want to make sure someone who's working that hard has the latest equipment to do business with.
We appreciate that, General. I will pass on the board's thanks, and this is a perfect segue into the next item because we do upgrade our equipment. We put items in the budget and have been keeping up with technologies so that we have not necessarily the next shiny object, but
Right.
but keeping up with industry standards. And as we do that, we have useful, serviceable equipment that gets surplused under our governing board policy for surplusing, which is still very useful equipment.
Oh, sure.
In the right hands. And it turns out the right hands are in Silver River Museum in Marion County Schools. We have leadership there at Vanguard High School that have worked under the Blue Schools Grant Program and became inspired to develop a water-related laboratory at the museum that could benefit school students throughout Marion County. The teacher's name is, I think, Mr. Hunter, and you see some of the pictures here. They very happily are the recipients of some donated equipment that's perfectly serviceable. The original acquisition cost for the equipment that they now have to set up this laboratory, $250,000. So our lab is very well equipped, and now Marion County Schools has one too.
Good.
We have signs up with the help of Lake County Water Authority. We have locks on the upper Oklawaha Lakes in the district and the Lake County Water Authority. As the water quality improves, we have more manatees coming up, moving around. We've even had reports of them all the way up to Lake Apopka. That's still rare, but not, they're out there. So with more manatees moving around and up and down that system, it's important to remind boaters who are not as used to seeing manatees in this part of our chain that, slow down and watch for manatees. So we've got new signs up, thanks and a shout out to Lake County Water Authority. And I also wanted you to know that under our lock tenders contract, we have them increasing their surveillance and observations of manatees so that we have better information to share with FWC and the local counties about the sea cows that are in our midst. Those of you who were able to join us yesterday, we had such a great event for the Apopka Service Center groundbreaking. General, you did a great job as our primary speaker. I want to thank everybody. I especially wanted to thank Lisa and her team for their work with the contracts and with the consultants that are working on this. But yesterday was it was just fun. It was great to be together. It was great to be able to look out over Lake Apopka. It was great to share those moments with the city of Apopka, the mayor and the councilmen and women who were able to attend, which we appreciated, and lots of stakeholders, friends of Lake Apopka, Orange, Audubon, and many others. We then had time for a tour on the North Shore, and many of you got to see some of the projects that are in place and going into place on the North Shore to help improve water quality in the lake. Yes, sir.
Can I get a copy of that slide right there?
Sure.
That's neat, showing everybody together. Go ahead, sir.
I have an important question. Who won bird bingo?
Who cheated the least?
You did.
Bird bingo was awesome.
It was fun. That was a great idea.
Janet, are you claiming to
I'm
have won?
claiming the win.
Okay, last but not least, you heard yesterday on that tour that the bald eagle population on the North Shore is expanding. There's several nests in unexpected places. And you saw with your own eyes thousands upon thousands of birds everywhere. So this is a wildlife haven, the restoration there. It's working for the water quality in the lake, but it's also working for habitat restoration.
Neat.
And sometimes we can, human beings can kind of love things a little too much or a little too closely. And on the North Shore, when the wildlife drive is open, it can get very crowded, and sometimes that combined with nesting and new families of baby birds can be a balancing act, right? Everybody wants to see, and when you see nature and it's right before your eyes, I think people learn to be conservationists in their own right because they understand what they're protecting, which is important. But you can't love them so much that you're frightening birds off the nest and abandoning nests and things like that. So recently, we had the opportunity to see that we had nests in an area that got a little bit too much attention. We shut down that area, which for the protection of the family of birds until the birds fledge. And we're very thankful to our Audubon, Florida Eagle Watch volunteers who are, I'll say, keeping an eagle eye out for all of our eagles' nests and helping us with that data collection. So thanks to everybody who is patient when we have to close areas like this, and happy Valentine's Day. Uh-oh, you needed that little shout out there. From a calendar perspective, we will be back in Palatka for our governing board meeting per usual, second Tuesday in March 9th. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Ochoa, for that report. Any other comments from the board? We'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.